Let's just start it at the top with Sins of Solar Empire Rebellion review. This is a very interesting video for one reason. I saw that this was on Mandalore's games to cover list for a really long time. I don't know much about this series, and I think that's the only video he has on it. I know this is like some sort of DLC or something, and it doesn't seem like he covered the base game and everything else. Maybe he just sums it up in this one video. So yeah, let's just get in there and see.
Friendly forces have arrived. Our ally has lost a colony.
Sins of a Solar Empire is a game that I can remember talking about with friends back in grade school. Now, near 20 years after launch, it is still getting balance patches. Not to mention the tons of total conversion mods.
Seriously?
It's like Star Wars, Star Trek, Mass Effect, Halo, Stargate, Battlestar Galactica, even Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
Fucking
even
nice.
Eve online. If you can name something sci-fi, someone has made a Sins mod, or at least tried to. And beyond the game itself being so mod-friendly, another reason these are so popular is that despite Sins initially looking really overwhelming, it's actually fairly simple to learn and play. It controls like many other RTS games. You only have money and 2 other mainline resources to manage. You can set a lot to be automated, everything from where buildings are placed to ship abilities, and ultimately, it only asks for simple actions on your part that do lead to complicated outcomes. You can learn and engage with the true depth of the game if you want to, but you don't need to have fun. Like, for years, I knew that building a trade port would increase income through trade ships, but only recently I looked up how trade routes worked in detail because I never needed to. It's straightforward enough that you don't have to dig through details unless you're hellbent on playing competitively. It's a self-declared RT4X. It's more than an RTS, but not quite the complexity some 4X games can get to. So while people do use Sins as a platform for their whatever fan game, Sins does have a story of its own. Some more bits have come out over the years through expansions and add-ons, so I'll go through all of that.
We don't know who they are. We don't know where they came from. But we do know they are desperate. And they've been on the run for a long time.
After 1,000 years of galactic peace, humanity encounters an alien race called the Visari, a once massive imperial slaving power, now on the run from something. Human worlds were organized under a prosperous trade system and were completely unprepared for a threat like this. It was then reorganized into the Trader Emergency Coalition, or TEC, to fight off the aliens. And while it took years to spin up properly, it did work and the Visari were beginning to be pushed back. But right as the war started to turn around, another force began striking different tech worlds. These were the Advent, who the Trade Order actually had encountered before. The actual details of this are kept vague. It's only known that while the Trade Order was looking for more planets to integrate, they found a strange desert world. The population was deemed not fit for membership, as they were
a sinful society of deviants.
And whatever they were smoking really pissed off the Trade Order, who seized their homeworld and then exiled them all off of it. It's been many generations since then, but now the Kushless Kushan have returned. They preach the word of the Unity, rampantly use AI and cybernetics, and have powerful psychic abilities. It's never elaborated on what exactly their spice melange was laced with or what the Trade Order found so offensive on finding them, but they've now struck at the most inconvenient time. And that was the original Sins of a Solar Empire. The opening cutscene for Rebellion is actually the explanation of that game's expansions. Entrenchment added massive star bases and other new defensive tools, and Diplomacy added a more fleshed out political and mission system. Now, Rebellion has all of that and more, because it's a standalone expansion that's kind of morphed into being its own game. There are no new major factions.
Yeah, that's an interesting progression. But yeah, now that I think about it, it was more common back in the day, but yeah, but back in the day there were games that had standalone expansions that literally became their own things. Nowadays it's not so common, I feel.
But the existing ones split into 2. Tech loyalists want to withdraw from the counteroffensive and fortify, while the rebels want to go on the offensive. The Advent loyalists want to continue their revenge against the Tech, where the Advent rebels are even more aggressive.
That's a cool ship, though.
Loyalists want to continue their.
It almost looks like a fucking flying sarcophagus or some kind of icon of fucking god, with that little face. That's cool.
revenge against the Tech, where the Advent rebels are even more radicalized. The Advent is becoming corrupted and needs a good old-fashioned purging from within. As for the Visari, they feel like they've been bogged down in the war and in the region for far too long and need to keep moving. Whatever the cosmic threat is, it's still after them and they need to go. The rebels actually have a similar plan but want to bring the other races with them. They think their chances of survival will go up working together and maybe eventually they'll find a way to fight back. It's a neat setting with room for all kinds of stories in its universe, but the games have no campaigns. Which here means the skirmish and multiplayer is fucking awesome.
Your presence is strong.
What you have to understand is, Sins has a lot of flavor to it. There are tons of lore bits about ships and technology, the variety of the voice acting and the music, the actual art design of the races themselves. There are lots of strategy games that are—
Why would you have so much attention to detail and not a campaign? That's weird.
are also skirmish and multiplayer only, but they make the mistake of having no personality. Even without campaigns, it still ends up having more personality than some more bare-bones games I've played that did. It's clear that a lot of thought and passion was put into the world and the setting, and it wasn't purely a vehicle for esports or something like that. Getting back to it, so far Rebellion has had 4 add-ons. They add small, hyper-specific features, but are welcome additions. Like Forbidden Worlds adds a few new planet types, but then dozens of new effects for the existing ones. Stellar Phenomena adds new deep space anomalies and random events that can happen in the game map. And Minor Factions adds independently owned planets who you can fight or integrate into your empire for unique abilities. However, the most game-shaking one is Outlaw Sectors.
That left side of the screen stretching to even behind my camera. That left side of the screen is fucking crazy with all the units listed. Oh my god.
This one adds some new maps and options for your planets like other DLCs did. But now, planets, independent or your own, will generate autonomous militias. They'll patrol your territory and respond to attacks, and even launch raids of their own against your enemies. They might help you in a battle, they might respond to a different threat, you never know. For one, this makes the game world a lot more dynamic with tiny skirmishes happening all over the place. More importantly, it reduces your micromanagement since beyond your defenses, you now have an automatic—
My cat is fucking attacking my hand for some reason. I don't know if
fleet
he
of—
wants a snack or to play or what.
go around taking care of small threats. It won't reach the glorious level of Distant Worlds automation, but it does mean managing less annoyances that should be beneath you. And if you don't like the sound of that, you can turn off the option and get everything else the pack offers. This is the one I would recommend getting if you could only get one, but they bundle them all together on sale often enough. They're all great additions, but not necessary to enjoy the base game, but if you play in multiplayer, if the host has them all, then you get them too. Now that you're more caught up, let's move on to the game's visuals. It may have gotten some nice visual touch-ups over the years, but even before that, considering that you could scale up from a starfighter to a star system all in real time, it's kind of incredible the level of detail this game has, considering just how much it's simulating at all times. Plus, it is an RTS and you're not expected to usually be in the sniff range of a spaceship, but the game does let you go up there to see the flaws and all, in a game that you'd usually play from this distance. I think it still holds up, especially when battles break out and you see all these individual weapons, missiles, lasers flying around. It's a colorful game and the lighting effects especially make battles visually appealing. It is dangerously easy to get lost in the sauce watching a fight play out, rather than actually taking control or doing what you should be. It's not as sharp as something like the Homeworld remasters, but the skill—
That does look like something I would do. I often did that in StarCraft actually. I would just look at the different animations all the fucking units had, and instead of actually strategizing and micromanaging,
can maintain with these effects is great. The ship designs are also excellent, like, let's start with the TEC. Their ships and structures are mainly blocky, angular, industrial, but they're not too uniform and still have a wide variety of designs. Remember, it's an emergency trade coalition. It's only recently that they've been rolling out ships especially designed for combat. Many of the capital vessels are repurposed civilian ships, like using a large cargo hauler. What was once a colony ship or a space cruise ship has now been drafted into the front lines. The Coalition had to respond to the Visari so quickly that retrofitting civilian ships like this was the best they could do at the time. It's like packing a bunch of autocannons onto a Carnival cruise ship, but still not quite as violent as an actual Carnival cruise ship. A tech capital might have to turn to broadside a target. But together, they're still effective, and their smaller ships have such a wide variety of designs because they represent many human cultures. So it does invoke a bit of Homeworld Cataclysm, my beloved, but it still has enough to make it unique and stand out on its own. Rebellion also introduced Titans, which are a super ship requiring a lot of tech and resource investment, and here they especially reflect the ideals of their faction. The tech loyalists want to withdraw and entrench, so their Titan is a giant flying fortress. Giant armored plates to the point that it looks like it could be made of cast iron, so naturally it's one of the most survivable ships in the game. In contrast, the tech rebels want to go on the offensive, and their Titan is a giant railgun. We should consolidate what we have.
Cool.
We should reach out. There's a lot to appreciate if you go looking for it, though I will say, that Visari Rebel Titan does remind me of Thargoids. Oh god, Thargoids. To their credit too, the Visari designs are appropriately alien. They can have sweeping curves or sharp spikes, or just look like a jumble of shapes. They more often look like some kind of insect or ancient sea life compared to a traditional spaceship. They were once an empire, and they rely far more on shields than armor. So many of their ships look ornate or imposing over the most structurally practical, because they could have more protection, but our strike craft can look like space scarabs instead. Maybe not the best idea in retrospect. As for the Advent, many of their ships are unmanned or only have a few psychics aboard. They look super utilitarian or have strange shapes and are impossibly flat or vertical. Most of their shapes have this weird inherent motion to them, like they're always diving forward, which would line up with their desire to go out and spread the unity before the rebels started Fourth Crusading themselves. But many of their craft resemble something like abstract artwork over a spaceship. It's like getting a cool ship design and a free Rorschach test at the same time. I just wish I could stop thinking about my dad. All the icons and other UI elements are also great, vibrant, appealing. It really is amazing just how simple interacting with the game is without being overly minimalist, but still has enough iconography to make playing the space video game fun. And while they are kept...
I wonder what year this game actually came out in. 2008. God damn. Like, I'm assuming the DLC is obviously much more recent, but...
Simple, the stars and worlds and phenomena you encounter do capture the magic of space. There are extra details around too, like highly populated planets having more visible traffic on them. And as another bonus, this is one of those games where unlocking a new technology can change the look of a unit or building. Getting a new weapon will likely show up on the models, since they show where all the shots are coming from. In short, there's a lot that can be muddy or outdated on a technical level, but between the strong foundation and years of support and touch-ups, it holds up very well, and I've always liked the look of the game. As for the soundscape, it was decent for the time period, but there are some sound effects that are just burned into my brain now. Whenever I think of a fight in Sins, I think of the howling bomber noises. You'll be hearing that in a lot of battles, but overall, it's fine for the time.
Standing by.
I mean, it sounds pretty goddamn accurate to what I would imagine like a space battle to sound.
The amount of sounds that can play at once is good, it's just the quality of them is all over the place. The mixing on some, and especially Titan abilities, can be obnoxiously loud. And sure, they are huge important ships and you want to know when they're doing something, but I don't need a THX sound test. It's certainly not deafening or anything, but the Titans are definitely the best example. There are just some sounds that cut their way through everything in a way that does feel off. As for the music, I think it's in an interesting spot. It's mainly made to be background ambient, so not too distracting while you're playing the game, but there are still running themes and motifs for each race. The Visari mainly have deep strings, the Advent have this religious kind of choir element to them, and the tech can range from military drums and horns to a gentle harp. A good amount is barely perceptible or a string going duh with a pause every so often, but what's good is really good, and the battle music in particular is the standout.
I mean, it's not the best music I have ever heard, but perfectly serviceable, I guess. Jesus, there's even more fucking units on the left now. This one sounds pretty nice.
The quiet music you heard before was to prepare you for these moments. They've been quietly drip-feeding you the themes, so you'll recognize it when it goes all out. And Rebellion added even more music with themes for the split factions. Like the Visari rebels want to travel with everyone, so their theme incorporates sounds from all the races. It's overall a fantastic soundtrack, and I don't think it really gets the attention it deserves. It even changes dynamically based on what's happening in the gravity well you're looking at, which is another excellent touch. As for the voice acting, like the sound, it's also kind of all over the place. Some is good, some gets repetitive. It does average out into what you'd expect for an RTS.
The Unity senses a pirate raid is inevitable.
We have obliterated an enemy's capital. A new colony has been founded.
An artifact has been uncovered.
Set sail, me hearties! Batten down the hatches and fire up the phase drive!
It's the hammier
Okay, that's a little bit goofy.
voice work that I do like in these games. As for the game itself, you start with a single planet. Around the planet, you can construct buildings that are defenses, unit creation factories, metal or crystal extractors if you do have any to exploit, and all kinds of other buildings. The world itself can be upgraded too to give you more building slots, increase your income, or specialize it into something else. What technology you can research costs money and resources, but you also need a certain number of lab buildings to progress. So inevitably, you spread out to other planets because your homeworld can only support so much. Sometimes you need research to colonize certain kinds of planets, and there is some nuance to all of this too. A faction like the Loyal Visari have their capital ships count as being a military lab, which means they don't have to settle on as many planets when it comes to building a military lab to progress to the military tech tree. They can even make their Titan their capital planet, so you can build tall with them. On a base level, every race in the game plays with the same foundations. Even the fleet rosters are very similar in their battlefield roles, but what's strong and weak in those rosters will vary around. That's not to say there are no unique role ships in a faction, because there are. And capital ships especially can have a wide variety of abilities, but all the base functions and goals across the systems are going to be the same. You don't start the game as tech and they have a market no one else does, and the Advent don't have some kind of unique religion mechanic. What's important is that this is not a negative. When you get into the game enough that you know how to play a faction, you now know how to play all the other factions as well. You'll still need to master their specialties, but you won't be confronted by a brand new mechanic or something missing. As an example, the Entrenchment expansion...
Yeah, that one depends on the... Like, if Mandalore says so, I believe that this game is good enough that this is a good feature. But it often depends on the game. Some games definitely are better off having like unique mechanics for each like playable faction, because you can then appeal to a broader audience, because some people will like a certain playstyle more and other playstyle less. But if the game does a good enough job of incorporating those playstyles to like basic mechanics, you don't need unique faction mechanics to account for that. How many uses you have for the basic tools is how many gameplay styles you provide to your players, yeah.
Added the ability to construct a starbase. They're massive space stations and customizable, so you can build one up to be a tanky weapons platform, or it could be a massive carrier for strikecraft, or you could add on cargo bays for trade or have an extra way to hold onto a planet. Beyond different stats, the different races will also have their own unique abilities for each starbase. Like, beyond their already different powers, a Visari starbase can move and show up in a different gravity well. The Tech Loyalists can't do that, but they can build 2 around a planet or 5 around a star. So playing each race still feels unique, even if they're all drawing from the same basic concepts. Tech bombers are just human pilots. Advent bombers are psychic mentats playing StarCraft with drones. But you know what they're for. The fun comes from what mechanics the faction can twist in their favor, and the game makes all of it easy to understand. Sins technically has 3D space combat. You can control the ship's height if you want to, but the game defaults to a 2D plane, and I have never had a reason to control the height. The ships organize themselves well enough to where it doesn't feel necessary, though I've probably missed out on some niche opportunities before. So it controls like any other flat plane strategy game. As for the overworld, all the planets and gravity wells are connected by phase lanes. There are a few ways around these, but you're mainly going to know how regions connect. When ships reach the edge of a system, they charge up their drive and take off. You will get detection abilities, but even without them, from the lanes themselves, you know where ships are going to be coming from, which makes it easy to set up defenses or leave ships in a position for an ambush. The phase lanes make understanding the war fronts simple and clear. You know exactly where you should be pushing to, which systems will be important, how an enemy can possibly get around your lines, and they even convey cultural influence as well. The farther planets get from your capital, the more shaky their allegiance, unless you spice up the propaganda. This can be done through some tech, starbases, ships, buildings, but some races are especially good at it. The Tech and Visari have multimedia, and the Tech Rebels have advanced level racism. The Advent have mind control. Their ships can turn other ships, and they're very good at turning planets. Enemy culture creeping in could risk a planet being overthrown, and strong culture on the home front stops an enemy from colonizing inside your influence. I push into Advent territory, but mind control horseshit slows me down from taking this frozen world immediately. This is so typical. Yuri's revenge on ice. It's one of the non-military ways to victory, so what number crunching do you do to track it? You look at the phase lanes, and what color they're turning is where the dominant culture is spreading. The approaching lies of the enemy are as visible as an oncoming train. Diplomacy with major factions has a simple relations meter.
That's a cool visualization of that mechanic.
And you can accept or offer missions to them to increase it further. Independent pirates can also be influenced by placing a bounty on other players or offering them special missions as well. The pirates are an ever-present threat on the map if they're enabled, but some factions like the Tech Rebels can straight up ally with them, to the point they could call them in as backup through their broadcast towers. Everyone else needs to bid them towards their enemies, or go and smash up their base directly. But keep in mind, attacking a pirate base is like attacking fucking Mordor. They are sturdier than they look, and as the game goes on and players get more disposable income, their threat becomes massive. But for an economically savvy player, the pirates can become their army, and no one can prove they're giving them the orders. As for minor factions, you pop a diplomatic ship in orbit, and as long as it's there, they're yours. Again, simple actions into complicated outcomes. I've wanted to do a Sins video for a long time, but did feel weirdly intimidated by it. Because when you think about everything in the game, it does feel overwhelming, but actually playing it, you don't get that sense. Making a game so massive, so relatively digestible, is one of its biggest achievements. And as the years go on, I find more and more to appreciate.
Higara, our home.
There are plenty of options to tweak the game if you don't want random events, or pirates, or super weapons, and there are tons of maps to choose from, and the game has a map maker as well. Whether you find a new artifact earlier, or decide to try a new fleet comp by how you level up your capital ships, it's such a highly replayable game, and it's no wonder people keep coming back to it. That said, there are definitely some shortcomings, and some come from things being kept easy. Like controlling a minor faction with an envoy ship means another race can roll in, kill that ship, replace it with their own, and the faction will immediately change to their side. Which feels abrupt and strange when it happens, but that's the price of keeping things simple. Diplomacy can feel inconsistent and strange, especially in multiplayer. Because you can research pacts like trade agreements you can make with another race, but in order to accept it, your relationship has to be at a certain level. So you can have 2 human players willing to do it, but the in-game rating isn't high enough. Which means having to assign the missions to get that number up. In a way, this is beneficial because the
That's weird.
agreements you can make are powerful, so it stops power gaming by making you engage with the same systems the AI does, but it gives you a loss of control in this area that other 4X games don't. And these things aren't outright bad, just different or awkward. What is bad is the late game slowdown that especially shows up on larger maps. In other 4X games, it would mean a longer turn. In a real-time one like this, it means your ship's jittering and slowing down. They've done great touch-ups, but the game is just based on old tech and they can only do so much. It might seem weird you can only choose portraits from a set instead of picking one for the individual race. The game's foundation being so old means there are still a lot of quirks like that tied to it. There are flaws, but not bad enough to stop the game from being incredible.
Also, the more money you pay the pirates, the more ships they build. Damn.
Really, Sins of a Solar Empire is quietly one of the RTS greats. There's no campaign to discuss, and the community is even more split down by being separated off into their mod of choice. It at least makes sense why it flies more under the radar. I did reach out to the GOG Goglins to put it on sale, so that might be in the pinned link, but we'll see. The publisher can be tricky, and speaking of them, they have put Sins of a Solar Empire 2 in early access. I'm already wary of games in early access, especially ones this big being buggy, but I might give it a shot sometime. For now, I am perfectly happy with Rebellion. That's all for now. Next time, pigs. Lots of pigs.
Oh, Amnesia Machine for Pigs, I assume.
As well. Oh, so that's where it went.
Yeah, I gotta say, I never heard about this RTS game. Honestly, it's kind of crazy that this has such like dedicated community and support, and it just flown under the radar like that. God damn. Looks cool, probably not something I would personally enjoy that much, but you know, it's an old game, probably goes like really cheaply by now. There is no harm in at least trying. But yeah, some of those mechanics sound really fucking good, man. Just that visualization of the influence coming towards other planet. I wish, like, Civilization has that. You have like cultural and religious pressure towards other cities, but it's not as clear as this, and I always feel like the readings in Civilization literally fucking lie to me, because it doesn't make sense. The game says this will happen in 6 turns, and then 3 turns later suddenly it happened like way earlier or way later. I love Sins of Solar Empire, it's fantastic. Its base game is optimized enough. I used to play it on my laptop. That's insane considering the scale of this game. Holy shit. I wanna take a quick peek at that list. Nice, Oni is recorded. And yeah, Amnesia Machine for Pigs is next. And I'm guessing he didn't like it. I mean, most people don't like how Machine for Pigs is compared to Dark Descent. Wonder what he's gonna cover next.